So, moment of silence and I go live. Good afternoon from Pisa. This is Alberto Di Minin, and with me is Andrea Tenucci. Ciao, Andrea.
Hello. Ciao, Alberto.
Ciao, Andrea. We are from Pisa, and Luca, welcoming you for a special IRC lecture today. And we have the pleasure to have from New York my friend Giovanni Battistini. Giovanni, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear very well. A pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here, and it's nice to see some known faces on my screen. Unfortunately, not face to face.
Well, Giovanni, this is the beauty and the sadness of this format that, as you know, started in the middle of the pandemic almost a year ago. IRC now is 1 year old, and we started from my terrace, and Andrea and I had this idea. Of course, distance is making things a little bit difficult, but it's also like the fact that we are accepting a little bit that we are online allows us to connect with some of you from the other side of the world without having you here in class with us in Pisa. So it's a mixed blessing, no? In a way.
It's a connected world. I'm really happy to be here.
Giovanni, you are right now managing director of Better Gambit, and I'm very curious to know about this new role that you have that is going to keep your life busy. You have been for many years vice president and one of the key persons for open innovation in Ferrero, and so I'd be very happy to discuss about you on innovation and open innovation in the food industry. Is a sector that we have investigated a lot in our classes, in our courses. So one of the aspects that for sure would be intriguing for my students is to understand how what is interesting and worth noticing in innovation in food. But most of all, we are interested to learn a little bit more about you, about your vision on business models, innovation, and we are going to absorb what you can tell us about your experience. As usual in IRC, we try to interact as much as possible, and let us start with you. Let us start with your life and what brought you to New York. So the first question for you, and very glad indeed that you accepted the invitation to be part of this conversation. What brought you to New York? What brought you in the place where you are now?
Okay, I hope I have a few gray hair on my head, so it goes back to year 2000 when I came to New York from Cleveland. And I had been an expatriate before, and then later a permanent hire with a company that was bought by ABB, as Abraham Boveri, in the industrial automation sector, where I had been an entrepreneur there. I started a few interesting at the time, nobody was calling that open innovation strategies, but really what we were doing was open innovation at the time, and it could be relevant to today's discussion. When I got after getting my green card, my permanent the green card is here in the States is kind of not being if you're not a citizen, obviously you have to go through a process that is quite lengthy at the time, and so I got my green card at the end of the 90s in 1999, and in 2000 I decided to join to leave the large company for a more entrepreneurial role. I was excited about the idea of getting myself involved with entrepreneurial innovation, something that was different than what I had tried before. And so I joined a startup as part of the leadership team in New York. It was called Four Corner Strategy. And it was the beginning of a fantastic 10 years adventure where I really learned a lot. I did many things in parallel, tried many things. Few things worked out very well. Many didn't work very well, which is kind of the beauty of the innovation business, but also it's one of the main characteristics. But anyhow, I've done. I co-founded companies. I work for venture capital. I actually work also in a corporate venture fund. I'd started a couple incubators / accelerators for the University of Arizona, the latest one, spun off companies. And after about 10 years, I decided to join an ingredient company. And I moved from the technology space into the food and the food ingredient space. I joined Firmenich at the end of 2010, where I built a significant business, again, based on open innovation. It was interesting because I think at Hank Chesbrough, when did he publish his book? I think 2007 or something, or 8?
2003.
2003. So it's like, so, at the time, nobody was really speaking about open innovation, and all of a sudden, kind of there was a ripple effect, and it was interesting to see how, for example, Firmenich had their ears open about open innovation concept, and all of a sudden they were talking to people like me that were very entrepreneurial and had lived and lived through, and learned through in the trenches. What really open innovation and entrepreneurial innovation means. When you're in an entrepreneurial space, you really need to partner by definition. And so all of a sudden, obviously I became probably a valuable commodity, but at the same time, I thought I wanted to challenge myself a little bit and see whether I could go back to a larger company and see whether some of the lessons I had learned and some of the approaches to innovation would work in a larger corporation. And we built a significant business on taste modulation there with Firmenich. And that's where my next phase, the next phase of my life of dealing with food and food ingredients started. And I just left Ferrero after a fantastic run where I also was brought in to really start their open innovation division and define a little bit their programs around open innovation. So
you were when you joined Ferrero, you said it very, very quickly, so I will actually re-emphasize this. You opened up the Open Innovation Initiative in Ferrero. You were at the beginning of this adventure. Does it mean that before you, Ferrero was not engaged in any sort of open innovation activity? Or can you help us explain what was the original task that you were assigned?
No, I mean, open innovation means many things, right? There are different models. So, Ferrero has done, in my view, had done open innovation for a very long time, since the beginning. And it's been, if you think about, working with partners to generate innovation, that's exactly what Ferrero did. They created an ecosystem very important in Piedmont and beyond, and an ecosystem of suppliers that were serving the vision of Michele Ferrero and all the R&D. So that's something that I think Ferrero has been an innovator, but not really a closed innovator from many perspectives, because they did work in partnership. There is a difference, though, when you have this type of approach, which is really more about, you think about something that you want to achieve, and you go out and find the partner to help you achieve that. And what Ferrero at the time, when wanted to achieve, and we're talking about early 2016 when I left Firmenich to join them in January. They were realizing obviously that the world is moving very fast, and this is more about the more modern approach to open innovation, or more recent, which is one of the approaches, by the way. And clearly there is a lot of innovation that happens outside the boundaries of a company that it's a very dynamic world, especially with the acceleration of certain technology. If you look at with everybody talking about the Moore's law, and looking at how the computing power doubles for the same cost every year. It's kind of, it's been proven right for so many years, since the 60s. But nobody's looking at, if you look at what happens at the omics in the genetic sequencing, for example, it's the cost curve is coming down much faster than what happens in the electronics industry. And so this by itself has tremendous impact on many aspects that relates to food, right? And so innovators are capturing that, and other trends that are kind of accelerating from that, and of course there are other trends obviously that are influencing, but I just want to make an example. Things are moving very fast. Innovators that are out there to disrupt and to think in different ways, so the concept that we started together with Ferrero was, okay, can we actually figure out a way to better network into these trends and understand where these innovators are and how to partner with them if they are relevant, if they bring innovation that is relevant to us. So it's a little bit more, different approach. At the time, we were talking about product to science, kind of the traditional, the more, from a concept of a product, go out and look for the science that helps you implement it. And then, we were thinking about, can we actually add a little bit more of a science to product? At the beginning, actually, the division was called science, right? And it became open innovation, because an emphasis really on science and technology. But really is that, can we capture that innovation and figure out how to best leverage it and write it? Let's not forget that even a company as successful as Ferrero can face inflection points at some point in their lifetime. Look at what happened to, famously Kodak, right? And it's not that they were not paying attention, but really something happened outside what their traditional bread and butter business would, and it really disrupted completely their business. And so, and they were a very, very solid and very successful companies at that time. So is clearly there are different dynamics in the food industry from the technology industry, and there are certain principle and process that applies anyhow. And innovation, in my view, is a process. It's really, it's a discipline, right? You need to, but then, every company, needs a different setup. So we set ourselves up to think about what is the model that is better suited for a company like Ferrero with a very strong R&D and innovation heritage, with a lot of pride, a lot of cultural identity. How do we actually define a model that works best and for the structure? Because obviously you're not working alone in an organization. You really need to work within the envelope always, right? Of where your the cultural framework, as I call it, right? If you got outside, you just don't. They are not impactful.
And so, what is the model? What were the strategic decisions that you had to implement in order to turn into a more systemic approach the overview of the strategy of open innovation and the approach to open innovation by Ferrero?
So the model was different than the model we used. They used at Firmenich, a totally different strategy. In this case, we decided that it was first of all, once we decided what was the overall concept that I just described, what was the goal and what was the aim, we had to figure out, okay, what are we? I mean, science is huge, right? If you look at it, so we really had to come up with a process that made sense and that would allow us to have a framework. And so we decided we really defined a process structure around streams of innovation. So we defined at the time 4 main streams that we wanted, look at, and I'm not disclosing anything that is proprietary here, because I already, Ferrero was quite public in that, and I actually communicated that in public venues other times. But basically, we were looking into, how do we actually look into what's happening in nutrition science, we'll call it metabolic response, and what is happening there in innovation. How can we capture the innovation that can help us, improve and optimize the nutritional profile of our products in different dimensions. The agri-science was key. Ferrero is a pioneer in really understanding, deeply the quality of their supply chain and their raw materials, and use them to leverage this to create superior products. And so how can we actually plug into the agri-science to further improve that, and to actually give our suppliers the weapons, or selected suppliers that have those that can give us that competitive advantage. The biotechnology, clearly an emerging award. It was another stream. A lot of happening there. Think about just traditional fermentation and what that can be converted into once you apply to different categories, and just as an example. And then, of course, the importance of the packaging and the novel materials that we call it product protection, that could actually preserve the quality of the materials, of the products, but at the same time, be sustainable. And we started with that. Then we defined, we started figuring out, okay, what are the opportunity areas, or now that we used to call them key priority areas. But basically, what is an opportunity area? An opportunity area is nothing else than we define as an intersection, among obviously the business priorities that you define and retune every year, strategically, and are not defined by us. And then what's happening in the interesting in the ecosystems, and think about your competition, your consumers, your suppliers. You have a number, and then the innovation trends, right? What's happening in the innovation ecosystem, and what are the main trends? So at the intersection of these 3 sets, we defined an opportunity area. We found ways of measuring and defining, and we established a fairly sophisticated process also to then figure out how to select how to prioritize and the opportunities that will come to us, and how to move and how to map them according to their potential impact, their maturity. We came out with a metric called return on the future that allowed us to measure how well we would do, but also to keep a balanced portfolio in terms of risk versus return. And so make the right bets. That you're going to make a lot of bets are not going to be successful, because that's especially if you look at the medium and longer term, chances are you're going to be wrong many times. And that's kind of the rule of, the IRC, but you learn a lot every time. And then, of course, then at the infrastructure level, think about the, 3 big geographical ecosystems, the Americas, North America prevalently, so we put an open innovation center in New York, Europe, of course, Luxembourg became, and Alba became kind of 2 souls. We had a center group there, but we had, and then the ecosystem in Singapore, where we built an innovation center in Asia, and we built an ecosystem, an innovation center in Singapore. And that allowed us to develop a network of partners that we wanted to develop. And so we started thinking, who are these partners, right? What kind of partners do we want to connect to? And clearly, well, I was bringing in, of course, my own network and what the lessons I had learned, how you actually interact. So you think about, so we kind of layered them in partners that were connectors. Connectors are the ones that can connect you to the real innovation opportunities out there. So the venture capital community, especially in the Americas, but now prevalently also in Europe and Asia, it's a big community of connectors. And so you need to network into that, because these are the people who are gonna, also be willing to share with you their deal flow, right? Because that's clearly a validation. It's part of their validation process, and you learn a lot from that. So the connectors could be also in open innovation partners, right, from other companies and so on. And then you have the opportunity partners themselves, the innovators, which are kind of very often in the startup world, but not only. Sometimes are established company with interesting, unique programs, and some of your suppliers sometimes they qualify, and of course some of the innovation starts at the university level in academia. So it's how do you actually connect to those academic world that can actually, and then we actually, the 3rd category of the partners that we defined at the time was the visionaries, who can really tell us where the world is going, who has a vision so that you can craft for each of these opportunity areas where the world is going to be 10 years from now, right? Beyond 10 years, well, we know, I think somebody said 100 years from now we're all dead, and so I think it was Keynes who said that, and so that's a certainty. But 10 years from now, can we actually figure out? Can we envision what most likely the world is going to be like for around this? And so that's how we started, and that's how we build, a big local teams. We had a budget to invest in external opportunities, and of course a central coordination team that was overseeing that, and also kind of important combine both the scientific technology acumen with the business acumen is very important, right? It's clearly, one of the process methodology I introduced, and then we changed over again, it was really thinking about how do you actually think about an opportunity, not just because it's cool science or cool technology, because you fall in love with that, but how is that bringing value in general? What is the value proposition? And then you test it, what are the actual, you do a number of proof of concept, figure out what the constraints of the technologies are, and what is the value now that you understand it better, that you can deliver not just in general to the ecosystem, which is important, but also to you as a company and to your vision, and can you use it? So these are all important questions. If you don't ask yourself, you end up, doing a lot of work, that is very unproductive, right? Because clearly innovation, I think my friend and mentor Jay Rao from Babson, teaches me that innovation and growth are synonyms. I actually think it's not just about growth; it's general. I think it's impact. So it's innovation and impact are probably synonyms, and growth is part of the impact, but it's not just financial growth. It's, if you don't generate impact, you're just doing science. You're just doing, you're not really driving that innovation to deliver the value or the impact that it can drive.
Hold on, I muted myself because I didn't want to disturb. I wanted to reemphasize something you said that is first time I hear it, and so I want to make sure that everybody got it. The categorization of partners in an open innovation strategy when it comes to a large company, looking at them, connectors, innovators, and content provider, let's say, innovators and visionaries. I have so many questions at this point. I'm just warming up. Let's see, you know, if we are able to follow the scheme of the conversation that we designed, but probably Giovanni, don't blame if we are like losing track of what we were supposed to talk about today. But in particular, when we go to the innovators, no, and what is the role, seen from the large company perspective, of SMEs? Let's just leave for a moment the startup world, because maybe they are one project, one company type of organizations. So in that case, either there is a fit or there is not really a fit, either for competences or a project with your company. But let's go on the SMEs. Sometimes SMEs are struggling to understand what is the role that they can play in an open innovation setting and how they can interact with large companies in open innovation efforts.
No, it's very good, and actually that tells me, reminds me that I forgot to mention one category that was fairly important in our system, which is just to be clear. We used to call them, on one side there were the platform partners, and these are the visionaries and the connectors, and there is the third category, which I forgot to mention, which are the enablers, which is very important, and I'm going to get to it in a second. And then the opportunity partners, the innovators, right, on the other side. So a lot of the SME very often, but not only SMEs. I mean, we weren't really differentiated by size, but they very often have an established relationship that goes back with the company with like Ferrero. There is always small and larger suppliers working with Ferrero traditionally to solve certain products, whether it's a technology for processes, whether it's a new ingredient, whether there are new things that are coming up. I don't think once you have an established relationship, clearly there is a trust that works very well, and Ferrero knows how to master that game very well, and I didn't need it to do any work in that space. My colleagues were handling absolutely extremely well in terms of the traditional role. The challenge is when you actually bring in something that is more disruptive, and as always, right, for any company, especially if that thing that is very disruptive is coming from either unknown SME or in general more of a startup. I happen to believe that in today's world, and where we were looking at right now at the time, comes really from the one project companies that you actually mentioned. They are really where venture capital is investing and where they think they're going to disrupt. And so you really need to pay attention, and there is a strategy to do that, in my view, that doesn't break the bank and allows you still as a large company. But the challenge is not so much about the strategy, how you select them and how to actually pick them. The strategy that challenges usually is like between the large and the small company is really, especially when it's an unproven technology, is really how to ride, I assume you guys are familiar with Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, kind of framework. And so it's, if Alberto, I don't know if I should summarize what it is or what is the the adoption curve, innovation adoption curve, and what Jeffrey Moore is postulating, the chasm, right?
To me, it's always fascinating to hear a manager like yourself summarizing something from theory. So
okay,
we went through, we discussed about crossing the chasm inside the tornado and everything, but I'm curious to your interpretation of that, because you can take these books from a variety of ways. So
no, absolutely, and I correct me. It is my own personal interpretation, but which I think I lived and breathed this approach through many attempts to get innovation adopted. So whether you are on the innovation side, innovator side, or whether you are at the receiving end. But in the end, you have to, when you're thinking about an open innovation framework for a company, you have to think in terms of, again, of the adoption curve, the innovation adoption curve, and you need to think about who are the early adopters, not you as a company, right, or the visionaries, but also inside the company, right? And because no matter what, that psychological chasm between the mainstream and the early adopter and the visionary exists. And just to summarize, the way I like to describe this is that the mainstream adopters are very pragmatic, and they look for a solution that's been proven, most likely recommended by somebody else who they trust, which normally is another mainstream adopter, and they buy what is called the whole solution, right? It's a whole product. It's not just a core product, but a number of ancillaries, products and services around that are very necessary. Startups and early innovation very often don't have the whole product, and they don't have the luxury of having the referral of some of the mainstream adopters, because mainstream adopters look at them, a little bit, there is skepticism, right, around that. And it's because they don't have all that. And so, but, in companies and in companies themselves, there are in a company, in a larger corporation, you have to assume there are the early adopters and the mainstream. And most likely, if you look at the distribution, your team, if you're doing open innovation, you are the early adopters. And there are other early adopters in the innovation community, or not the extended innovation community in any company, that you need to partner with, right, in order to do that. And the question here is that what is the best strategy to cross the chasm within an organization to go from an early adoption, and test do your proof of concept and do things, and then migrate to, cross the chasm and let the innovator cross the chasm with you, right? Because you're kind of become an external ambassador. And, companies that do this, that's a real trick, right? The ability of a company to execute on this, transition is key. And if they don't, and there are, incredible examples in companies who have been credible innovators and early adopters on one side and fail miserably on some innovation because they failed to cross the chasm. And so, and I think you have to think in those terms. So we without disclosing too much of the inside of Ferrero, but we actually deploy 3 different we had Open Innovation 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, and to really get this model right for Ferrero, so that to make that transition as smooth as possible, and allow not just the innovation that anybody can see, right, is a no-brainer, but also the innovation that might be a little bit far out, right, to actually be perceived at some point and integrated and into the innovation pipeline, right, of a great innovator like Ferrero or other companies. So that's really the tricky part. And so you have to ask yourself and say, how do I do that? Well, it really depends. In my view, there is not a one size fits all. It really depends on the culture, and but you really need to think about basic questions. That do I want to bring very early visibility on the early stage opportunities? Or do we want to be a little bit of do we want to set a shielded screen, right? That it filters out a little bit so that, because you're going to see a lot of stuff and you might actually, jeopardize even your credibility, right? Because a lot of these things at the early stage fail, right? So how do you want to do that? My advice, if you can, is really try to actually filter a little bit the interaction with the external world, and really bring in, the opportunities after that being vetted a little bit, right? But then you need early involvement, and with some of your internal innovation partners that they need to at some point become the believers, right? And they need to. So and that helps you as well figure out whether this is something that can work or not within the organization. So you really need at some point to join the forces and actually implement. So you really have to think about all these dynamics to actually think about what are the steps your innovation. In your innovation process, when an early stage innovation, whether it's a technology or ingredient, whatever you're bringing in, is going to be deployed potentially through your organization, and what are the steps, and where you need to kill it or just put it on hold, right? Another element that I learned a lot, and this is and I learn the hard way all the times, but it's you really need to, the one thing that is maybe a little bit different in an organization when you think about the adoption curve is that there is something that a friend of mine actually defined momentum, and which is really, what is the momentum of that is in a company, right? Companies all of a sudden the attention happens, right? The attention is, for some reason, external pressure, internal vision, whatever it gets focused on. You need to be ready. You need to think about to nurture your open innovation opportunities, and you're not going to push them through the funnel. Even if you believe in them, there are going to be some of them you're going to be able to push forward, and some of them you won't. And so the momentum is something you need to think about, and you need to be able to jump on it when that happens, because this is what's going to accelerate by definition, and allow you the camps crossing very easy. So that's an area that you need to start thinking about, how you actually, if you're in a large company, how you actually leverage that. And sometimes you want to contribute to the buildup of the momentum, right? That's where you actually set up your vision, and that's where you actually, which you did, but sometimes it takes time, right? It takes time. A special program I have in mind, we started very early on the first year to say, I think this is the direction, this is what, and it took 2 years before finally, actually almost 3 years before finally it was like, wow, this is the direction we got to go. And everything accelerated like boom. And we had all the technology ready and all the partners ready to actually, feed it, and it caught on fire. So this is how you need to think in terms of those problematics of the adoption. Cannot hear you. You're on mute.
To summarize the many things you said, Giovanni, right now, it's, let's focus on the various elements that, in my opinion, need to be reworked a little bit in order us to process the selection. Let's start from there. In a quick and easy way, please tell us how does a company select which projects should go through in an innovation pipeline? Which are the ones instead that we need to kill?
Well, I don't know how all the companies do, because they're obviously clearly you have to measure on one side, clearly there is the fit, and your appetite for risk, right? Where you know how far you want to go in terms of the maturity, for example, of a technology is pretty key, right? So the fit clearly is a strategic fit. So you have to really to figure out what is the value proposition is, and there's no other way to do that than really understanding, decomposing that, and really figure out what is the actual value. Is this serving some to fill some of the gaps I see? And there are several ways of, you can, one of the tools that I like is that, think in terms of whole solution. You would love to full technology stacks you would like to take to market, right? What does it take in order to get a special product without going into examples that might be confidential, but real products, a final product that you want to take to the market. What is missing out there if you want to get there, and what do I need to do, and how far they are? So you actually start developing a matrix where you actually look at the whole solutions that you want to address, and then look at your basically the key components you need to get there. And that's a good actually Cisco, I think, pioneered this approach, and I found it very successful over the years, in figuring out whether get a monitoring space. Because if you find a technology that fill a gap, that really implements the full solution that is desirable for you to take to market, that's clearly very valuable, right? And that defines it's a one way of defining what kind of value this can unlock. But if you have we have more than one, but you have 2, 3 gaps, then you start really really look into that. The chances are, if these 2, 3 gaps are tied to technology that are very far in time and not very mature, you're wasting your time, right? So the combination of the missing links, of the gaps, is very important to consider. But basically, that's kind of and how you actually define one way of defining the fit, which I like a lot. But once you've done that, you really need to think about, okay, if I found an opportunity that can fill that specific gap, and and it has a value, right? That opportunity has a potential value for you, a value proposition. And what we used to do, and I've done that at Filmage as well, is like, what is kind of, can we define a score for that value at the beginning, right? Can we actually define what is actually the potential value as a whole, but also what is the value proposition, because it might actually be a technology that can help you in several ways, right? So that also complements. So we define a score, and we had a way to do that, internally to, in terms of both value proposition and financial value that can unlock, whether a cost saving, a revenue increase, or whatever. I mean, and obviously, that's how we got to this the cost savings, or revenue increase, and risk management. These are the 3 categories that we were looking at. And then but then another very important element at the beginning, the early stage of the evaluation, is really figuring out what is the readiness, what is the maturity of that technology. We actually call it availability or access to that, because it's more than a maturity, because you might have actually a technology that is ready today, but it's not accessible because it's covered. Competitors might have a patent that you might not get to it. There is some exclusivity there. So you have to ask yourself that question. In general, though, is maturity of the technology. It's very rare that you actually get locked out that way, but you need to pay attention in some very narrow spaces that might be an issue. And so, so you combine then, impact versus maturity, and then that's where it comes from, the first early evaluation, what we call the return of the future. Basically, it's the slope. It's basically the impact divided by the maturity is what tells you, where, whether something is promising. And keep in mind that if you have a high impact technology, you probably can go back in time a few more years, because it's such a high impact that you say, I'm going to look into a technology even 3 or 4 years from maturity, because it's so important that I'm going to start investing in this. But if you have a technology that is, not very high impact, that is still very mature, that's not probably what you wanna look at, right? And that's where we started looking into the return of the future as the ratio between these two elements, and a good indicators for the early stage opportunities. And you have one number, right? You have one number you can compare. You can actually, do a lot of things with that one number. Not only be a decision, a tool, but also be a way for you to measure how well you're doing in different areas, different opportunity areas, different streams, the teams themselves. And you can ask yourself the question at some point, are we actually, once you look at the numbers and the combined numbers, are we actually looking, too much into this area and too little into these areas? There are good, it's very useful metric actually to analyze. So that's the first stage. And then of course there are several levels. At that point, you decide, we say, hey, return on the future over a certain number. We're going to take a look at that. Obviously, it's always triangulation. You always have a discussion. The discussion is more important than the tool and the metrics. And you bring it, you have a decision process. You go through. You have a board. You have to go through. You have to have it, and then once you reach kind of a consensus, you start investing, right? And then you start understanding much better what the opportunity is about. You do your proof of concept. You at the beginning with ask the innovator to work for you, and then later on you start collaborate, and then you understand the constraints. You understand, and then at that point you go back and say, okay, now I understand this much better. Maybe I put together in a very early stage, financial model that tells me what is the potential IRR, what is the technical risk, what is the market risk. And we had a more sophisticated version of the return on the future at that point, which is still the same thing, potential return versus the risk you're taking. Now you start thinking about, the market risk and the technical risk combined, obviously, just the technical risk is at the beginning is what you worry the most usually, but yeah.
So having a gap to fill, scoring how relevant is this gap, access, availability, let's say, of the enabling technologies, 3 components that you cited are very important to prepare the work that then you call return on the future.
Yeah.
Where I see 2 missing elements here, and I want to provoke you to ask you one at a time, if I may. What is the core business? You didn't talk to me about the core business of the firm. I asked you to select, and but selection is also, is it basically somewhere hidden in the process?
Yeah.
Opportunities that are not fitting your core business don't come to you, or maybe you are unable to see them. Where is the trick? Because or you just forgot about that?
No, very good point. Is that when I probably got overlooked with it when, at the beginning, when you define the opportunity areas you're going to focus on, one of the 3 elements I remember I talk about the innovation and the ecosystem in general, and the innovation trend, ecosystem trends, and then your business priorities. And that's where you really need to be clear on what the priorities are, where you want to go. It's not really just about the core business, but also what your future business is going to be. And remember, we were really looking ahead in a structured strategic by definition. It depends on what, obviously, where are you, what kind of open innovation you are doing. But in our world, core business clearly very important, but for example, with Firmenich, but even with Ferrero, the real question is what are the business you want to get into, and because that's where sometimes you need, or what is the core business transforming into, that you need to pay attention and how you can leverage it. So these are, and that's where when you actually test the value proposition for that, that's basically what you're asking. You're getting yourself, what is this doing to my core business? And what is this taking me to a new business that I want to be in? Do I have obviously, is there, what do I need to get there if I want to get there? And do I have a competitive advantage to get there? These are the adjacencies, basically, that you need to think about.
But then, Giovanni, is this if we're talking about the core business, more or less, no, I'm not saying any employee in the company, but we should be quite clear about what is our core business. When you're talking to me about the future business that I want to get in, we're getting into a territory. And so the question to you, back to you again, is what is the future of the business? A decision that is above the pay grade of the open innovator.
Absolutely.
Or should the open innovator in the company contribute to the design of the future of the business?
Yes, to both. In other words, it is the role of the head of a company, and to define what is the vision, where is the company going and what kind of markets, right? But it's the duty of teams like the Open Innovation team to point to bring in the vision of where the vision could be, or where the vision could be challenged because of the signals you capture outside. And that's very key. And that's really the challenge is always in any company, is really how to actually influence that. And that's why I think the Open Innovation team, but in general, if you want to be an entrepreneur in any companies, it's very hard to do it if you don't secure the vesting from the top when you're a very large companies. And I did that in an ABB. I was pretty middle management level and it was such an Herculean thing that was taking the company completely different directions. And I succeeded, but I had to find so many sponsors within the company, right, that it was very, very Herculean. So one of the reasons that led me to actually start at some point, going entrepreneurial way. But when when I re-enter the corporate world, one of the things that I wanted to make sure it was, where is the vision of the leadership? Where do they want to go? Do I share this vision? But also, can I influence that vision? Because if you cannot influence the vision, it's going to be, there's going to be divergence, right? And there's always divergence. It's not a problem. I mean, your vision might be slightly different, and there are certain areas that you can park and say, let's focus on what the commonalities are, because you always need to look at the overlaps. But can you do something about it? And so that's why I'm answering your question this way, Alberto.
Both. It's a criteria to keep in mind, because it needs to be, you need to have an endorsement, a very clear endorsement, right? So I hope people capture this.
It's not just about endorsement. You also, it's your duty to actually, you might see something coming that that it has to be looked at, because it might change the vision of a company. This is how big companies grow even bigger and continue to succeed in innovation, if they are able to learn from what's changing in the environment. So if you don't listen to your antennas, you're not going to be able to and you cannot. And that's a critical element. Yeah.
Correct. But when you answered us both, and I really like your answer, you said at the same time the top needs to give us a vision.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the open innovator within the company is one of the resources that the company has to intersect areas of the future where it might be worth going and exploring and exploiting.
Absolutely.
And this brings me to the second point, to the second aspect that so far did not surface a lot in your discussion about open innovation, and I know it's central for you, so I'm going to bring it up, which is people. Okay, we talked a lot about process, and you know how much, for me, process is important. But let's understand how the people component, and when I mean people, I want to be generic as much as possible to allow you to focus on whatever you think is relevant of people. When do people matter, and how do people matter in an open innovation process?
Well, first of all, always people matter. It's all about the people all the times. If you are in the business of creating new venture, creating new innovation, creating innovation, it's all about the people. It's not just in innovation, right? It's people. In the end, are the one. Your team is going to break or make your success, or and take you where you want to go. So absolutely key. And I always paid a lot of attention about hiring and building a team. In Ferrero, I had the luxury of almost starting from scratch and building a new organization, and I paid a lot of attention, especially on to the first hires, and advised by the leadership, of course. We agreed that it would, the right blend of people from the outside and people from the inside was necessary. So we wanted to create, a hybrid team also in terms of the internal provenance of where they were coming from. Very important, because you need to have an external perspective, but you need to blend it with the internal perspective. Otherwise, you're not successful for many reasons. The second thing is I do believe that you need to find the right type of for this type of job. You need to the right profile. It's really it has to be. You really need to find people who are curious minds, who are really lifelong learners, who are not intimidated by getting themselves to learn new things. Both on the science and technology side, because no matter, even if you're on the business side, you need to understand enough and need to have the right questions. But then you also have to, develop the business acumen I was talking about. So what I did, and always done, I was even in film, is I try to hire both people, the bean counters somebody talked about before, but the people who also understand how to quantify the business, do the analysis and do the research and the analysis on the business side, with the people who really understand technology, science in their areas. But in the end, you cannot know everything about the science and technology, so you're going to hire for talent, not for specific. That's what I always do, by the way. And you're gonna, you're gonna get people who are extremely curious and not intimidated. A lot of scientists, sometimes the scientific method sometimes, teaches you to actually become very skeptical, and you really want to go very deep into what and you don't want to say much about what is not outside your competence areas, which is a very fair and honest approach. The scientific competence you need to have in this case instead is really about, can you ask the right questions, can you understand the answers, and can you learn enough and quickly enough so that you can formulate an opinion going outside of your comfort zone. And so it's not easy to find the right type of profile, and so the selection process, sometimes for this type of profiles is not it's very critical, and sometimes it takes time to find the right people. And very often what happens is you need to invest a lot of time in hiring for talent, and then make the team grow. And that's kind of you always have a combination, right? A few senior people might actually be your the people helping you disseminate. The final thing is that if you are talking about if you are dealing with a global organization, like I did, you know, and today it's hard to imagine something that's not global, quite frankly. But is, you know, you have to think about the distribution of the team and how do you actually speak a common language, even if you're, you know, if you cannot talk every day because you're, you know, that 12 hours difference in the time zones. And so so that's one of the reasons, by the way, why you know, I spent some time to build a process and a terminology and a methodology that would help us speak the same language, right? So that it would be easier for everybody talk. Even, you know, it's not, quite frankly, in the end, even the process I described before, how we will make the selection, you know, return on the future, you know, impact, maturity. In the end, the discussion you are having on that is more important than anything else, right? In the end, is how you get to that, or, you know, those temporary answers that then you're going to reformulate later on is really important, because nobody has a crystal ball. You really need to triangulate, and it's very hard to do that if you don't have a common language to speak, and it takes time to actually build it. So that's clearly an area where you really need to pay a lot of attention.
And Giovanni, one problem, if I may add, no, so I hope people appreciated the idea that we want curious minds, that we need to develop a common language. There is an element of entrepreneurship in the job description of the open innovator. But at the same time, Giovanni, especially for a large organization, but also SMEs, you cannot assume that people who you will need to implement an open innovation strategy do have these characteristics. And so maybe the process works right. The projects you selected are the ones you should be working, but you find resistance. And some of the people that do not have these characteristics, on the other hand, you need to get them on board, either within your company, among partners, within university. So the ingredients that we talked about before, for example, the business outlet, right, or the enabling technologies, might be in the wrong hands, or might be in the hands of people that do not share the same characteristics. Oh, and absolutely. This is a big problem, no? Because it's, at the end, you said it at the first, it's all about people. What do we do? Do we give up? We ask the CEO to intervention, or is there any clever way to solve a people problem when it comes to open innovation?
I mean, there is always people problem, people opportunities, right? This is where the beauty of, you know, organizational complex, you know, environments where, you know, you have all sorts of characters. You have a cultural, you know, a culture that dominates and tend to establish certain rules of engagement. But in the end, there are some people who have better people skills than others, which is another element that you really need to keep in mind. Is that, you know, what are the people skills that of the team you have at hand? In the end, the decision process all about, you know, the people, as you pointed out. That's why I talk about the crossing the chasm framework and the innovation adoption, because you really need to think in terms of the psychology of those people, and it's how you actually bridge the chasm. It's a real, you know, question, regardless of whether you're now. And I don't want to, you know, paraphrase, you know, a person who I didn't have the honor to meet, which was Michele Ferrero, but I know he was a big believer of, because I was told that a lot of times, of the fact that if people don't believe in what you want to lead, in where you want to lead them, they're not going to do it. So and that's true for everything. that's a lessons that we need to think about. So you really need to spend time with people, and you need to actually get them, and even going, clearly having some coverage and some support from the top, always very critical, because there are politics you have to deal with, there are all these sort of things. But in the end, you really need to get people to believe in that. And sometimes, you can establish a good relationship, which is honest and trustful. And once you establish that, that, even if there's going to be disagreement, there's going to be an honest disagreement based on, different visions, which is fine. But you're not going to work around that just going to, the top, or, sometimes, of course, it helps, right? This is the way we're going to do, and they're going to do it. And you're not going to have always everybody agreeing on that. So that's clearly very important. But make sure that the people that in the end execute on that are really fully understand. They really fully understand what you want to do, even what the big boss is going to tell them to do, and make sure that the strategy doesn't get lost, right? And or make sure you adapt and adjust as you learn, which is also very important, because you don't want people who, and it's always, that, interesting to typology. You have the people who are say, hey, this is the way to go, let's go full, and I'm not going to change my plan until the end. And you don't want that either, right? You want to have a good dose of self-criticism every time. And so, say, am I doing the right thing?
I want to our time is running out, and I have other things to ask you. But I want to just emphasize for everyone here what you just said. I think it's very important when you discuss about implementation. Giovanni referred to the adoption curve as a very interesting tool to keep in mind when we are dealing with people, and I guess the implication, just to be clear, Giovanni, is to choose the starting point and kind of like trigger a snowball effect.
You gotta find your beachhead. You gotta find your beachhead, exactly.
You gotta find your beachhead. So, Andrea, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna continue to work with you because you're not definitely my beachhead here in the process. I'll work with other people in the Institute of Management to identify the beachhead. But this is very important. Second aspect, important to keep in mind, that stubbornness might just not pay as much as we expected, as well as we expected, and flexibility, let's put it this way, and a pinch of realism might be very well an important characteristic of innovators. And Andrea, once again, it looks like Giovanni has been observing us in all these years that we've been working together, and how much flexibility was an aspect. But Giovanni, here we have students, young managers that are actually entering the job market, or they're getting their feet wet in the job market for the first time. What is the right element? You change jobs, you change companies many times. I'm very curious to know right now where you're headed now. But what is the ingredient that my students and my friends should look in the places where they're working on? Like what it's called sometimes fit. Sometimes is like is the right moment for you to be in the right time. Help me direct my students to the right place and help me understand when they are not in the right place.
Well, I think if you are in the business of, if you want to be an innovator, if you want to get involved with innovation, I assume all your students are are here because they are interested in innovation. You somehow you want to change things, and so it's very important that you're very honest with yourself, with the company that is going to hire you or that hired you, and in terms of your the impact you can generate. And obviously there are several ways of generating impact. It's always when you come in and in a certain role, depending on how high you are in the organization, obviously you might have more impact at it. But I would say that good companies are good company that allow you a little bit of a leg room in terms of generating some impact and in changing things, are companies who listen to at every level, right? And they empower. They give you a little bit of leg room, your sandbox, where you can generate your impact. Whether it's hey, I saw something here, I wanna this is important, or I'm you gave me something to do, I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. So I'd say that that's pretty clear, that if you are driven by, at least personally, I was always driven to those positions and roles, and I was very lucky in my professional life where I could actually generate an impact. And sometimes the impact was not, in the end, it wasn't that successful, but sometimes it was extremely successful. Whatever you want to measure success with, and I think, but it's important that you feel you have a say, right? And it doesn't mean you're the only one who has a say. So that's the one thing. But the other thing is that you have to have a learning predisposition and really fully understand always, right, who's coming before you. So arrogance is definitely not the right approach either. And which obviously is very, very important things to keep in mind. And if you want to be successful in a company, you need to, in a larger organization especially, take your time to really understand what's going on around you, because if you play outside the envelope of the culture, you're not going to be impactful. And you need to find where is the place where you can actually generate the impact. But within that envelope, you can play at the border of the envelope, but don't stay outside too far, too long, because you can even go out a little bit, but you're not gonna be able to impact everything if you play outside that box. So that's clearly so. I don't know if that was a clear answer, Alberto, but it's very difficult to give a general answer to a general question like this. But
I think yeah, I think you helped us indeed find at least a way to select the right place where to go and where to be next. And I am sure that some of us asked ourselves, are we in the right place right now? Can we influence change? Can we contribute to, are we empowered and to do so in our organization? I want to, before thanking you for your time and asking you now, what is the next project that you are working on? I need to go back to some of the questions I've received online, and in particular, let's go back 1 second to a key aspect of open innovation, which is partnerships, right? Stefano Ciciliot and Stefano Businaro basically are asking a little bit, at the end of the day, what is open innovation? Is it about partnership? Or is it more than that? And also, when you are successful in your open innovation strategy, is your partner benefiting too? And this is something very key to understand when we discuss about open innovation, in the sense of a win-win strategy. Is it always necessary? So 2 questions for you in one. How central is the partnership component in open innovation? Is is that it? That's what we're talking about, or is something more? And second, can we help our partner grow when our open innovation strategy is successful?
No, I think the first question, it's really a larger question about the role of open innovation and what, because it's, in the past when we didn't have even this term, everybody was thinking about business development, strategy, strategic partnerships. You had different roles. You had, even look at, obviously a venture fund or corporate venture funds, and then you had the M&A teams, and they all looked in, they looked at, the external world from different perspectives. Open innovation is about partnership with innovation in mind. It's not just a partner that it's definitely about partnerships. It's better, but it's all about how you actually strategically select the right partners and work with them and generate innovation that even goes beyond what the simple sum of the two capabilities are. So it's really, you're really looking for synergies, and you're really looking for and that leads to the second question. Absolutely, it has to be about a win-win. If you're not thinking about if you're thinking about partnering with at least that's the way I think, and that's kind of always been my business driver. You always want to think in terms of a win-win situation, because if you're not gonna get into a win-win situation with a partnership, you're not gonna succeed. You have to create value, and not only maybe for the two partners, but even for multiple entities. We talk so much about ecosystem. This is where you actually generate, the incredible acceleration that can be generated if you unlock certain elements. If you actually start with an innovation that can really unlock a lot of win-win situation, even that you really didn't expect. And sometimes it's a messy situation where you can strategize up to a certain point, but then all of a sudden becomes something that it takes a life on its own, and everybody benefit from that. Obviously, you have to consider your strategic position. You want to still occupy as a company, right, a predominant position, defend your competitive advantage, and build it. But if your partners are not winning with you, it's not going to last. It's not going to last. And when you deal with small, large companies, even that's even that dynamic. You want that startup to be successful, because if they're not successful, nothing is going to happen. You're going to, how many times we see companies acquiring startups and then killing the innovation and the assets they acquired, because there was no understanding of the synergies and how to unlock the win-win situation I was talking about.
Giovanni, last question for you. Where is your professional life taking you next?
I formed Better Gambit because I want to continue to work on creating successful ventures and partnering to do that. So that's what I'm doing. And now I'm advising a few investors. I'm working with companies to reassess and review their innovation pipeline. And I'm also creating ventures. And right now I'm really busy trying to fund a company at the intersection between wearable technology and nutrition and personalized nutrition. I do believe there is a interesting gap I want to fill, and if anybody can fill that gap, is going to generate an acceleration in the overall personalized nutrition industry. And so I'm working now on licensing actually technology with a university in California to create a new business around that, a new venture. So it's one of my projects. And of course, Alberto want to build something beyond that. We'll have a call next week that is going to tell us if we can do something in Pisa even, right?
Indeed, that would that'd be wonderful. Giovanni, is it better one project at a time right now for you, or are you building up a portfolio of projects?
I never work on a project at a time. So it's always, especially when you're in my, obviously I have to be selective because I don't want to overcommit. I also, I want to, there were some changes in my personal life that, now in last year that allow me to, because of the changes, I want to keep this flexibility, the flexible flexible profession. But at the same time, I'm working on a number of interesting projects, and I'm always open to hear new ideas and new concepts where I can add value. And so I'm, if something is interesting, if I can make the time, I'm definitely going to get involved with. And there are only 24 hours in a day, so you have to be a little bit selective. But I'm having a lot of fun right now, Alberto, which is always very important.
Having a lot of fun is always very important. Let's keep this in mind. And I see Andrea nodding. That's good. So from our perspective, that is something that we want to keep in mind. The day is made of 24 hours. So we've been talking for 90 minutes, almost like a football match. Unless there are last minute questions, without going through extra time, let me take a moment to thank a lot Giovanni, and thank you so much, as Natalia is saying, to share with us your experience. It's very important for us to find people like you, Giovanni, that find the time to share with me and with the students and with my friends their life experience and their view of the world. So indeed, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been fun, and thanks for the great questions. I hope it was useful. And if anybody wants to follow up with me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn and send me a message. I'll be happy to follow up.
Wonderful, Giovanni. And Giovanni is very fast on LinkedIn too. So it's true that he will follow up with
Sometimes I'm fast. Sometimes I'm fast. Depending. I hope it can be fast enough. Don't set the bar.
Let me remind on the closing, before closing the and saying goodbye to the people following us from YouTube channel, that we are going to have an extraordinary next event on Thursday, the 13th, if I'm not mistaken, at 6 p.m. Once again from the US, David Otresh is going to connect from us. David is one of the leading scholars on innovation in SMEs. He has been one of the people realizing how relevant SMEs were important for economic growth in the US. And with my friend Tommaso Minola, he has recently expanded his research and made clear what are the components of innovation policy for SMEs. I think it's going to be an incredibly interesting talk for innovation managers and for people working in innovation policy. So let's adjourn for today, and let's meet again for Thursday at 6 p.m. On Thursday, the 13th of May. Thank you so much.
Ciao, everybody.
Thank you, Giovanni.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.